Hi everyone, I'm the plant propagator and welcome to my channel. What I wanted to talk with you today is about propagation, very simple propagation of Coleus. So these are actually cuttings that I made from a Coleus that's in the front of my house, and it's so easy to propagate these plants. Coleus, just so you know, is a member of the Lamiaceae family, and it's otherwise known as the mint family. That's probably the better thing to say. And Coleus is it's a great plant. It is known more for its foliage, as you can tell here, than for the flowers. The flowers on most of these families, most of the plants in this family are small. They can be anywhere from white to mostly blue. You get some reds. So you have lots of colorations, but the flowers tend to be small. There are some members of the mint family that has some large flowers, but for the most part, they're not very showy, and they have a very characteristic shape. With Coleus, this is, again, it's mostly known for the foliage here, and the foliage, the variation in foliage colorations is really very striking. Size of the plant, general plant morphology, everything can be very different. But these are just beautiful foliage plants. I have ones that are like this that are growing in front of my house, and these do pretty well this time of the year though. So I'm in Southwest Florida. It is mid to late summer. It's hot, and these things get a little bit stressed out, and they get a little thin, and they start to lose their leaves. Don't look great. So in the meantime, I made cuttings of this in order to get new plants out of it. Some of the other ones that I have in the front of my house, I've got a really nice purple one, and again, the purple one has small flowers. The purple, dark purple leaves don't do well in the hot Florida sunshine, but still, when it's nice, the plants look really good, and they really add a nice splash of color wherever you have them. If you're in colder parts of the country, people make cuttings of Coleus and bring them inside in the winter, and that's fine to do also. Here in Southwest Florida, I make cuttings, and I just continually propagate these plants because it is so easy to do. I do want to also mention some other, as far as characteristics of the Lamiaceae, the mint family. I want to mention some characteristics, and so that you can easily distinguish what plants are in the mint family. A lot of the herbs tend to be in the mint family. If you have a question about the plant, what it is, you can take a look at the stem of the plant. It's very characteristic for the stem of members of the mint family to be square. And so you can look at some of these things. This is a big, fat stem of this Coleus plant. You can just look at it and see the square, and it's very characteristic. You say, well, okay, is it a little bit mostly square, or is it completely square? And when I look at this, it just looks completely square. The other thing that you can do is you can take the stem of the plant and hold it between your fingertips and just kind of rotate it. And if it rotates 90 degrees each time, you can suspect that it's a member of the mint family. Some of the other members of the mint family that you may know. So this is basil, another member of the mint family, and the same type of thing that you do with this. You can kind of feel the square stem, but the other thing is to rotate it in your fingers. And I'm not just doing this, it is rotating. Just because of how it moves, it's rotating 90 degrees on every turn. Here is some sage, and it does the same thing. It's a wilty sage, but it's the same thing, very characteristic of this member. And a lot of the members of this family they're very fragrant. You don't get that really from Coleus, but you do get it from many of the other members. And remember, it is the mint family, so all the classical mints are members of the same family that Coleus is associated with. Okay, let's get back to why we're here. I want to show you how to make cuttings of this and how so easy they are to propagate. I am the plant propagator, and so this is one of the main things that I do with plants. I also, just so you know, I grow most of what I work with are orchids. So the orchids are behind me, known more for their flowers as opposed to the mint family that aren't. But I want to show you today propagation of Coleus. So what you do is you make stem cuttings, and what you ideally want to do is make stem cuttings, and then the ones like the ones I've done here, place them in water immediately after cutting. And here I can do the rotation again, and you can see square stems on these. These normally are going to have leaves all the way down, but my plants are losing the leaves, and so this is but normally what you do is you remove all but just a couple of leaves. Whenever you make cuttings, whenever you do propagation of plants, these are stressed. These cuttings are stressed. I mean, you cut them off, you remove them from plants, you remove them from the water source, and we're going to kind of keep them away from the water source. I should say that that a lot of people root these in water directly, and it's really a better idea to root them directly in soil because that's where they're going to go when you decide to plant them back in your garden. So you remove most of the leaves of this cutting, and usually what I like to do is just even remove the apical most leaves so that you have just really a couple of leaves left. The reason for doing that is the leaves are a source of evaporation of water, and that process in plants is called transpiration. And when there's so much water loss, you can minimize that by removing the leaves that is that source. So when you make a cutting that you're going to root, you remove most of the leaves, and it's sad, but what you're left with is something like this. And this is what you use. I don't know if it's counterintuitive after I've explained to you why you do this. A lot of people have a hard time cutting most of the leaves off of their cutting, but this is what you have to do in order to get the greatest success. These then are placed in soil. The soil that I use is in these pots, and it has already been pre-wet. But the soil that I use is, and this is important for successful propagation of Coleus as well as most other plants, is this is Miracle-Gro moisture control potting mix. And I really like this brand of potting mix. Don't go for an off-brand, buy this stuff. It works really good. And again, it's the Miracle-Gro brand. It's a little bit more expensive. It's important to have the moisture control. What the moisture control means is that there are little beads that are in here that absorb water when water is applied, but then if it's dry, they release water. So it's moisture control. It's more difficult to underwater and overwater if you use this potting mix. The other thing is that when it does come time to transfer these into your garden, there's a nucleus of moisture control soil that's around your plant. So what I've found is that you'll have more successful survival of these plants in your soil if you use this as the potting mix for rooting. I've been seeing a lot of YouTube videos explaining why you shouldn't use bag potting mixes, and that's absolutely, I have a PhD in plant physiology. I taught propagation at a major university for 35 years, and this stuff is great. I kind of know what I'm talking about. I think what happens is people who don't know as much about this whole process, they open this up, they have an old bag of this stuff, and they open it and it smells moldy. Well, there's and they say fungus, and that's pathogenic fungi, and it's going to infect your plants. Well, it's not. There may be in really old bags, you may get a little bit of an aroma of mold, but it's not. These are not pathogenic fungi that are growing here. And the reality of this is, there is fungi associated with most terrestrial plants, and they're beneficial fungi. They're pathogenic also, but there's beneficial fungi, so that there's different fungus that's in the soil around you, that's in the potting mix, that's in everything. And some people actually sell potting mix that has beneficial mycorrhizal fungi. Myco means fungal, rhizae means root associated. Orchids, for example, have beneficial root associated fungi that they need for seed germination and that's beneficial for orchid growth. And I actually inoculate my orchid plants with these mycorrhizal fungi. In this mix, there's no mycorrhizae included, but don't be concerned if there's a little bit of a mold smell that's associated with this, because it's not a pathogenic fungi. It's not going to infect your plants. I mean, if it bothers you and you don't like the smell of it, well, okay, don't use it, but it's not going to hurt your plants, the specific type that's likely in there, if you buy the good stuff. Okay, let's get back to the rooting process. All right, so the way to do this is to I usually put a couple of cuttings in each one of my pots, and these are 3-inch pots, and I don't know if you can tell, but there's water dripping out of the bottom of the pots because I pre-moisten these. So these are wet, and again, you can't, with this potting mix, it's hard to overdo it. It's hard to overwater because it's a light, airy, it's soilless, so it's a synthetic. It's light and airy. It has perlite that I can see in there. It has vermiculite. It has chunks of different types of organic material. It also has the the moisture retentive particles that are in there, and there's a number of different things in there. But it's what I've found with this stuff, it's very difficult to overwater when you use this. All right, so how you do this? All right, so let me take my first cutting here, and I've already removed the leaves, most of the leaves from this cutting, and I always use a rooting powder. So this is garden safe take root. This is a rooting powder, and it's a rooting hormone. This contains the active ingredient in here is indole-butyric acid, or IBA, which is a naturally occurring hormone that plants do make. And what IBA, it's an auxin type growth regulator, and what IBA does is it induces root initiation at high levels. IBA, indole-butyric acid, will inhibit root elongation, but what goes on here and what's happening is it induces root formation, and then over time it degrades and the levels get low enough so that you can get root elongation. But I really like using the hormone powder because you get much higher efficiency of root induction. In the old days, they used to put fungicide in here. I contacted the people at Garden Safe, and they say, no, there's no fungicide in here. So this is just a little bit, very low concentrations of this growth hormone, growth regulator, and then mostly inert ingredients in the form of a white powder. All right, so what you do is you take your cutting, you place it in your rooting powder, which if the base of the cutting, I should say this needs to be wet so that the powder will adhere to it. You shake the residual off, and then you place it down in the holes that you've made, and then tap the soilless mix around it. Okay, let's take another one right here, and this is a larger cutting, and I'm going to remove most of the leaves. And this is larger, but it's also a little bit too long. So I'm going to take most of the leaves off, and then I'm going to reach in here and pull out the break off if I can. And I just did it, the shoot tip. Again, you want to kind of keep a simple cutting here with maybe a couple leaves. You can have 4 leaves, but then because this is a little bit long, I'm going to cut this again to generate this cutting. This cutting is wet, and I place it in my rooting powder, knock off the extra, and then I will place it down in the hole that I pre-made. Okay, there's one more in here, and so this has a little bit more leaves on it. Again, it's getting repetitive, I know, but this is what you do. You strip off the old leaves here, and I'm going to leave 3 on this one, just because I'm mixing it up a little bit. And then I'm going to pull off the apex or the shoot tip, and it's very small and delicate, but it can be just kind of snapped off. Okay, so this is, and this is about the right size, so this is my cutting here. Okay, and then I dip it down in here, knock off the remnant, the remaining, and place it down in this hole that I've made in this mix. The other thing, the last thing that I want to do, these are cuttings that I made a while ago, and they're growing really well. So I actually want to use a cutting from here, from my plants that I already have, and I'm going to cut everything off. This has, this is a nice tissue, and it has some of the buds are growing out of it, and so some shoots are growing out of the side of this, but I'm going to cut all this off. This is a really young, rapidly growing piece of tissue, and I'm looking at this, and there's actually a flower in here. If there's any flowers on your, talk about a drain on your cutting, cut the flower off, all right? This came off of a fresh plant, and so what we're going to do is dip this in water and then dip it in the rooting powder. All right, so right here, it's the same type of thing. All right, and then it goes down in the soil, and then the soilless mix goes around it. The last thing to do here is to water these guys in, and it doesn't take much since everything's already been pre-wet, and you don't want to do a whole lot because you've got the rooting powder on there, and you don't want to wash too much of that off. It's okay to apply a little bit, but you don't want to wash too much of that off, right? So these are ready to go. If you're in a real dry environment, you can put a bag over the top of it to kind of retain moisture here. But here in Southwest Florida, it is so humid outside that I'm just going to put these on the ground over here, actually on pavers above the ground over here. So these just sit outside, and then what happens, and what happened with these were done maybe a couple of months ago here, and I've got this and this. Now the other thing is that I did 3 of these, so sometimes this doesn't work at 100% of the cases, you know, what I have is 2 of the 3 worked. Sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes they are failures, but I want to show you what this looks like. Now you'll be able to tell that your cutting is working because what will happen is the axillary buds, so the side buds, the side shoots will grow out. So they'll turn color, they'll grow out. These might actually wilt just a little bit. Your new cuttings might wilt a little bit. They might turn a little bit yellow. But when they start greening up, when you start getting axillary bud growth, that's an indicator that, yay, this is working. We can pull this out and take a look at the roots, but this has been a long time. Wow, there's not a whole lot of roots on here, but there are roots, as that you can see right here. So this is ready to go into the ground. This one, I imagine I'm going to get a lot more roots just because these are growing so rapidly and so nicely. Yeah, so this is all their roots on the bottom. They're all the way around. And these actually, I'm going to plant these next to the old plants in the front of my house as we go. But what's happening on these shoots that I did, these cuttings that I did, you know, this, I think you'll start getting the outgrowth of the axillary buds after a month, but this has been 2 months. But you get outgrowth of these things, and then if you want your plants to stay bushy, you can trim the shoot apex, and that will cause the plants to bush out a little bit. The way that these cuttings were done is I trimmed off the shoot tip when I made these cuttings, so just naturally these guys they're gonna bush out a little bit, and that's what's going on here. All right, so very, very simple to do. Propagation of Coleus through cuttings. The other thing is that you're going to get whatever plant you start with, obviously, that's what you're going to get. These plants all came from a plant with this kind of patterning in the leaves, and that's what that'll continue, and that's how you clone or vegetatively propagate these types of plants, Coleus. All right, that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed my video. If you did and you want to keep on seeing them, it would help me out if you could click on like, share, and subscribe to my channel if you're not already a subscriber. All right, that's all I have for today. Again, I hope you enjoyed it, and happy propagating.